Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to Breaking the Silence. I'm Renee.
And I'm Kelly.
And if you're new here, welcome. We are so happy to have you here. Grab your favorite cup of coffee, get comfortable, and settle in with us for a little while. Today, we're talking about something that so many people wonder after a breakup, and that is why are anxious people and avoidance so drawn to each other? If you've ever found yourself asking, why did this relationship feel so intense? Why couldn't we seem to get it right? Why do I still think about them even though I know the relationship wasn't healthy? This conversation is for you. And before we begin, we want to say something I think is really important. This isn't about blaming anxious people, and it isn't about blaming the avoidant. Attachment styles are adaptations. They're ways we learn to survive, usually long before we ever entered romantic relationships. So, our goal today is not to label anyone, it's to help you understand either understand yourself, understand the people you've loved, and begin moving toward healthier relationships. So let's dive into it. Kelly, I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have is that anxious and avoidant people are complete opposite. They're actually much more alike than they realize. They both fear losing connection. They just protect themselves differently. So, for example, the anxious person, we've talked about this many times, but they move towards connection, and avoidant moves away from it. But ultimately, both are trying to feel emotionally safe. And when an anxious person meets someone who seems calm, independent, and confident, it often feels incredibly attractive. The avoidant can seem mysterious, grounded, maybe self assured, and maybe even seem a little hard to read. To someone who's been longing for stability, they can feel incredibly appealing. But what often they're experiencing isn't emotional security, it's emotional unpredictability. And our nervous system can confuse unpredictability with chemistry. Our brains are wired to pay attention to what's unpredictable. Sometimes we mistake the heightened attention for deeper connection.
Okay, so I can understand why someone with an anxious attachment would be drawn to an avoidant. But what about the other way around? Why are avoidants attracted to anxious people in the beginning?
I think that's because avoidants are often drawn to anxious partners too. At first, the anxious partner feels refreshing. They're affectionate, they're emotionally expressive, they communicate, they can pursue, they make the avoidant feel deeply wanted. And for someone who's spent much of life keeping emotions at arm's length, that kind of attention feels exciting. And I think there's also the piece of it that for each of them, they are admiring the qualities the other person has that maybe they are lacking or not as strong in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like they're kind of longing at themselves. Like,
Right. Like maybe that how they seem steady and all the ways I described self-assured that the avoidant can seem, the anxious partner can like not be as strong in those areas within themselves. And vice versa for the avoidant, maybe communication isn't their strong suit, being emotionally expressive, being affectionate, those things aren't, they don't come natural and easy for them.
right.
So they are drawn even more to those qualities, you know? And so it can feel exciting and they are drawn to it until it starts to feel overwhelming. And this is usually where the cycle begins. The anxious partner, we've talked about this many times, notices the distance. So they move closer, they text more, they ask more questions, they try harder. The avoidant feels the pressure, so they need space and they withdraw, they become quieter, they take longer to respond, they need more time alone. And then the anxious partner feels abandoned. The avoidant feels trapped. And neither person is trying to hurt the other. They are each reacting to fear.
What a dance, right?
Absolutely.
Here's what I'm wondering. If they're both trying to feel safe, then why does it end up feeling so unsafe?
Because one person says, please don't leave me,
Mhm.
while the other one says to themselves, please don't lose me, even if that means I have to create some distance. Both are asking for safety. They're just speaking different emotional languages. And one of the hardest truths to understand is this: neither person is usually responding to what's happening today. They're responding to what happened years ago. The anxious partner may have learned that old love could disappear without warning, so they became hyper aware of distance. The avoidant may have learned that vulnerability wasn't safe or that relying on others led to disappointment. So closeness eventually starts to feel uncomfortable. Neither person consciously chooses these reactions. Their nervous system gets there first. So, saying that, Kelly, I have a question for you. Have you ever noticed how quickly that happens before either person even realizes what's going on? Both people are reacting from old wounds instead of the relationship that's actually in front of them.
Yeah, but honestly, until like these episodes and just even the stuff that you've taught me, because I did think it was like in present time. Well, yes and no, because I feel like I think people have probably heard this before. Like, why in relationships, like, why do you keep punishing me for somebody's past? You know what I mean? Like, why I didn't do this to you, but you're still treating me as if I was the one because I think the things that trigger or feel familiar, right? But honestly, I guess initially I never thought that was from the past, childhood past, yeah, relationships and stuff like that. But yeah, so this is
Mhm.
eye opening as far as that goes, I think.
And I think once you realize that, I think that then you, because we still get caught in it, I think, of course, the more work we do, the easier it is to catch ourselves before we get there. But I think once you realize it and you reflect back on it, you're like, wow, I do see how quick just past emotions can, what happened in the past can just sort of hijack you. Like that's a perfect way of how I've described it in coaching. It's like you're just hijacked, and before you know it, like you're just reacting, you're just, and
Yeah.
yes, and the more work you do, I think, and the more then you are able to catch it and come from a more calm place and not react from those old wounds.
Yeah. Can we talk about why these relationships can be so hard to walk away from? Because they really are. Because people beat themselves up for still missing someone that hurt them. And can I add to that too that I think why is it the person that hurts you is the one that you want to fix it?
Well, I think it comes down to the familiar piece. Even though, like, your body is just, when you're hurting, maybe even if, like, you're hurting for a different reason, something completely not even involving them, your body can, like, long for just that familiar person for that comfort. I totally can relate to that, and I've had times that things have happened in my life that have nothing to do even with the person, but yet I wanted that person, because they felt familiar, to be there to somehow make it better. Not that they could fix it, but it
Right.
it was just the familiarity. Again, it always goes back to what's familiar.
To be your comforter.
Yes, but when you're healing, you can acknowledge, like, I do feel that, like, pull to, like, want to connect, and also say, but that doesn't serve me well, and really be able to look at, this is because you're hurting over this situation right now, and then learn to just, I can sit with myself in that, and I can feel those feelings, and I don't need someone else to comfort me. I can just sit with that, and those feelings will move through my body, and I will let myself feel them, or and do them whatever way that's healthy for listeners, whether that's maybe talking to another trusted friend or journaling it or just sitting with it. And the emotions do pass through our body. They really do. Like the other night, I just sat there even and with a situation and just let the tears just stream down my face. And I was actually talking to my son about this. And it passed. I let myself feel it. I was sad. I let the tears roll, and it moved through my body.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about this too. Like when you do give yourself that space, like to not reach out to a person or to contact them, you feel empowered by letting that time frame go by. And then I know there's been times that then that contact would be made and you're like, I have to start this all over again. So there
Mhm.
is some empowerment when you do let yourself, your nervous system kind of recover and give yourself that distance to kind of just to start healing.
Absolutely. But yeah, you are absolutely right. I do think people beat themselves up over missing someone who hurt them. And that is why these relationships can feel so addictive. Again, think about a slot machine. We've talked about this before. Most of the time, nothing happens, but every once in a while, you win.
Hmm.
That unpredictable reward keeps people pulling the lever. Relationships can become similar. When things are good, they're amazing. You feel connected, you feel loved, you feel hopeful. Then suddenly, there's the distance and the silence, the confusion. The moments of closeness become so powerful that you keep chasing them. You literally become addicted to them. It's the intermittent reinforcement that we've talked about. And you're looking For you're no longer just chasing the person, you're now chasing the feeling that you had during those good moments. Not because the relationship was necessarily so healthy, but because your nervous system keeps wanting that next emotional high, that next hit of dopamine. And that's what causes it to become so addictive. So, one thing we hear all the time is we had such amazing chemistry, and we never want to dismiss that. The feelings were real, the connection was real, the memories are real. I know that, my friend. I know. But chemistry alone doesn't build healthy love. Sometimes chemistry simply means two attachment wounds recognized each other. That doesn't mean love wasn't real. It means the attraction wasn't necessarily pointing you toward health. That's why healthy love can feel unfamiliar at first. It isn't filled with the constant uncertainty. You don't have to earn someone's attention or affection. You aren't constantly wondering where you stand. There's the consistency we've talked about. There's repair after conflict, honest communication, emotional safety. And I know at first that can feel boring, not because it lacks love, but because it lacks chaos. And if chaos has always felt normal, peace can take time to trust.
So let me ask the question I know people are wondering right now. Can an anxious person and an avoidant actually have a healthy relationship together? Is that possible?
I actually think they can. And not necessarily because one person changes the other. That's not what we're about here. And not because love magically fixes attachment wounds either, but because both people are willing to heal. I actually think there's something beautiful about what initially draws them together. This sort of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. When an anxious person is often drawn to the avoidance calmness, the independence, in the steady presence, and the avoidant is drawn to the anxious person's warmth, emotional openness, affection, and ability to connect. Those aren't bad qualities for either one of them. Those are beautiful qualities. The problem isn't their differences. The problem is when fear takes over. So, again, when the anxious person's desire for closeness becomes panic, the avoidance need for space becomes emotional withdrawal. Those are the problems. Their greatest strengths become their greatest struggles. But when both people are doing the work, those same differences can actually balance each other. The anxious partner often invites emotional intimacy, while the avoidant often brings the steadiness during the difficult moments. Instead of triggering one another, they begin strengthening one another. That's why I don't think the question is Can anxious and avoidant relationship work? I think the better question is, are both people willing to heal? Because healing changes the relationship far more than compatibility ever will.
I love that because it takes away the hopelessness. It isn't about finding the perfect attachment style. It's about finding someone who's willing to grow alongside you. And sometimes that's really difficult though,
Oh, for sure.
to just hang in there. It can be difficult.
Absolutely. But I think there's that piece. I mean, yes, of course, any kind of relationship, there's got to be growth in it. Whether, I mean, we're talking about romantic relationships, but family relationships, relationships with our children, or any kind of relationship, there's growth involved in work. Maybe not so much with like, well, no, even, I mean, of course, it's not quite the same as a romantic relationship because that's so much more intimate and so much more connected. But even
Mm.
still with a friendship, you have to nurture it, you have to grow, you know? I mean, there has to be repair when there's conflict still, you know, all the things.
I just think about, like, not to get too personal in my own relationships, but like even just thinking about today's episode, just kind of reflecting over it and driving home, thinking about my early relationships and knowing how broken I was then and the
Mm.
healing that I was going to need, but not really knowing what was, for lack of better words, what was wrong with me. Because I was looking back and I was like, gosh, my nervous system still is sometimes, but it was all over the place. And so now, even being married now, you being my best friend, all the good, bad, and the ugly. But at the same time, I think in past relationships, I was showing up different. That person was showing up different. And I do think that me and my husband now, we do try to show up for each other differently. I think there's definitely some healing because I think we realize we are married. We love each other. We've made a commitment not only to ourselves, but our children, our families and stuff like that. And again, not that it's 100% perfect because it's not, but I think it's one of those things where you have to look inward and just always know. And like, if you're like, oh, it'd just be so much easier if I was alone or whatever, would it? No. And oh, if people always think the grass is greener on the other side, and you're like, no, because I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that we are in the midst of this committed to that healing, knowing
Mhm.
this is worth fighting for, this
Right.
is worth, and maybe finally getting to a point in our lives. And again, I give tons of credit to you because you've enlightened me to all this, and then in doing these that so I probably kind of went around in like a big circle.
No, I think that was amazing.
But yeah, I mean, you can just keep out there floundering around in the sea, but this healing is just incredibly important. I mean, and I think in the if this was 100 miles of healing, I might be 20 miles in. Yes. But I do see the healing in myself and the way I show up differently. And sometimes it's hard because, man, you still want to revert right back to, I mean, I'll be like, I feel pretty good. I feel pretty healthy. I'm pretty strong. And then I'm like, you'll just see that rear its ugly head and you're just like, there it is.
But I think that's also the sort of the encouraging part of like when you can feel like, oh, if this was old me, this is exactly how I'd want to respond. And you
Yeah.
can at least even acknowledge it and like, wow, the growth that is there. Okay, I'm
Yes.
not going to do that. I'm going
Yeah.
to do this instead.
We both had that conversation. We have had that. Oh, I would have showed up a lot. I would
Yeah.
not have shown up this way maybe even 5 years ago, even early in our relationship.
Right. I love that. And I think, which talking about that in relationships and all that, that sort of leads right into me adding something here because I think it is really important. sometimes people hear these conversations and they can also start to think, so I have to wait until someone is completely healed before um, they're capable of a healthy relationship. And we don't actually believe that's true. None of us are fully healed. And we've talked about that many times. Healing continues throughout our lives. Healthy relationships aren't built by perfect people. You can attest to that, right? Like we both can. They're
Absolutely.
built by people who are willing. They're willing to learn, they're willing to apologize, willing to communicate, and willing to become more emotionally available than they were yesterday. If someone says, I don't know how to do this yet, but I'm reading the books, I'm in therapy, maybe, I'm asking questions, I'm trying. That's different. That is so different than someone who says, this is just who I am.
Mm.
Growth doesn't require perfection. It does require humility. Relationships don't heal us by itself, but healthy relationship often becomes the mirror that we've talked about. It becomes the mirror that reveals what still needs healing. So the question isn't, are they healed? The better question is, are they healing?
Like, I think iron kind of sharpens iron.
Absolutely.
And I was thinking about this too, because I would think this of myself too. Like, I have to be perfect to be in a relationship or better or more healed to be not bring as much confusion, chaos, dysfunction. And I was thinking about this like when you start a new job. Yeah, you're going to have some skill set to get that job, right? But you're not perfect in the job. You haven't perfected it. And so you have the skill set to get the job. And then as you're in the job and you get to learn the job and things like that, that's where you perfect it more. And I was thinking, kind of like in a relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you're listening today after the end of an anxious avoidant relationship, we want you to hear this. The relationship didn't fail because you were too much. It didn't fail because you weren't enough. And it didn't fail because the other person was incapable of love. More often than not, it was two nervous systems trying to protect two wounded hearts. Understanding that doesn't excuse unhealthy behavior. Boundaries still matter. Accountability still matters. And safety still matters. But understanding helps us stop carrying shame that doesn't belong to either one of us. Healing starts when you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And begin asking, what happened to me? And how can I heal? That's where freedom begins.
I love that. Well,
Good. Yes, absolutely. Kelly, do you have any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
I don't think so. But well, other than I really love what you just said, because I think a lot of people do. They think, what's wrong with me? Why can't I
Hmm.
get this right? Why do I keep sabotaging my relationships? And I just think that's such a good question to ask yourself. What happened to me and how can I heal? And I think it's not always about being in relationships. I think it's also just being the best version of yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that when we ask that question, It also helps us to let go of maybe that feeling of hopelessness, like how you like the what's wrong with me, like that can feel very hopeless, like, am I ever going to get it right? I just want to love somebody, but I don't know how, or these things keep happening. So I think it's a beautiful way to reframe it to actually offer hope. So, and that really is, then I think, where freedom begins and where hope begins. Before we close, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself in an anxious, avoidant relationship? And if so, what part of today's conversation resonated with you the most? Share it with us in the comments. We read them and they help shape future episodes. And if this conversation helped you understand yourself or someone you love, would you share it with a friend? You never know who may need to hear this today. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode with us. And until next time, remember this: healing is possible. Secure love exists. And if you've always found yourself drawn to relationships that feel like an emotional roller coaster, that does not have to be your story forever. The more you heal, the more your heart begins to recognize peace instead of chaos. And that's the kind of love we hope every one of you experiences. As always, we send you off with so much love, and we'll see you next time on Breaking the Silence.